Now you wouldn't know it by looking at me, but our guest speaker and I have something in common. I actually grew up in part of the Cajun cowboy family and worked cattle when I was a kid. Was thrown from a few horses. Fortunately, I never broke a rib, Johnny. So Johnny Boggs has worked cattle, has been bucked off of horses, breaking 2 ribs the last time. Shot rapids in a canoe, hiked across mountains and deserts, traipsed around ghost towns, and spent hours poring over microfilm and library archives, all in the name of finding a good story. His accent is deep-rooted South Carolina, and if you guys need an interpreter, Johnny spent many years as a sports reporter for Dallas newspapers. There he learned how to take good notes, write quickly and accurately, and meet deadlines. After he married Lisa, who is a realtor, they moved to Santa Fe, where they have a son, Jack, who recently turned 17. 8-time Western Writers of America Spur winner, Johnny is a full-time freelance writer, making a living as a writer. A man of many hats, he produces at least 2 full-length novels a year, minimally 24 magazine articles for publication as divergent as True West, Western Art and Architecture, and Boy's Life. He also writes short stories, winning the coveted Wrangler Award for A Piano at Dead Man's Crossing. That sounds wonderful. He can be seen on Santa Fe's stages in various acting roles. And that isn't enough to keep him busy. He's also the editor for WWA's flagship publication, The Roundup. Booklist magazine called Johnny Boggs, quote, among the best Western writers at work today. So we are really honored to have him here. And I want to remind everybody, Johnny's doing the workshop at 12:30. So stick around, sign up for the workshop at the back. And in the meantime, I'd like you to get you to help me welcome Johnny Boggs.
Let me clarify one thing about that writing, making a living writing. It depends on your definition of making a living. and the research trips, they don't always turn out the way you hope. I just got back Thursday from researching a novel and a couple of magazine articles I'm doing. And my hotel choices weren't ideal upon retrospect. The first hotel I stopped at in San Angelo for a magazine article, they gave me my receipt and pointed out the Wi-Fi code and the number for security. The second hotel I stopped at in Chinook, Kansas was okay, except they didn't have my reservations. Luckily, I printed out a receipt of that to show them, so I got into the room, and the next morning, as I was checking out, I noticed a couple that were being given a ride in a police car. I really don't know why, but it might have had something to do with the car a few rooms down where the rear passenger side window was now taped up. And then the hotel in Casper, Wyoming, I'm sorry, there were no cops, but there was an ambulance on the scene. I decided to work in a baseball game in Kansas City on the trip, and that was rained out. And yes, I did buy the ticket in advance, and I have no plans to get back to Kansas City, so I got to figure out what to do about that. Of course, this was all during the flooding. All sorts of flooding, which meant all sorts of road closures, which meant all sorts of delays getting where I'm going and getting lost a number of times, being late for lunch with editors and stuff like that. And it also meant that I was driving on some winding road where I had no idea where I was going, but hopefully the Garmin was going to get me to my next hotel, which was incident-free. When a giant, mutant raccoon stepped into the road and looked at me with the beady red eyes. And I'm doing 55 miles an hour and I have nowhere to go except right over that raccoon in the rental car that I had rented, because I thought the gas on this trip and everything would work out probably more ideal than driving a 19 or an old Jeep that guzzles gas. But the next morning I looked at it and I said, well, I don't really see any damage, so I think I'm okay here. And that was fine until a few days later, on my way to Casper, when I noticed the radical hailstorm that was pelting my car. But even that survived. What didn't survive was on the last day. The last day, I'm driving home. I've made it to Cortez, Colorado. Almost. And I'm driving along, and I'm noticing all these nice birds, geese, ducks, turkey buzzards, hawks, whatever. I'm just driving along, minding my own business. 5 hours from home, when I noticed this bird just flying over the car. And all of a sudden, I don't know if he got caught in the slipstream or whatever, but all of a sudden it just flew right past me, and I felt the car shudder as the bird hit somewhere in the car. So there's nowhere where I can turn off because the shoulders are too narrow. So I keep riding. I'm kind of rattled by this, and then I decide, I'll just keep driving. The car's running fine, everything's okay. I finally make it out home, and I say, I'll look at the front of the car tomorrow morning. But I didn't have to, because when I looked at the side of the car, there was this tremendous dent in the rear quarter panel. So we're going to see if Hertz and Alliance Global Travel Insurance, which I bought, luckily, believes that a bird could do that kind of job. So yeah, writing is not always what it's cracked out to be. But we're supposed to be talking about publishing. Like I know anything about publishing. I've got some notes here. And the changes in publishing, which are changing every day. So I got an email from an editor that I happen to know. And he says, this is the average day being a publisher in a major New York house. And there aren't that many major New York houses anymore. Okay? 8:45 a.m. 6 panic emails from our publisher wanting to know why the ebook edition of a reissue from 2017 isn't available on Amazon. Everyone in sales piles on. 8:47 a.m. I replied that it is in fact available in ebook on Amazon and has been for 2 months. 8:50 a.m. Author emails to inform me that he got the galleys for his new book and 48 pages from the original manuscript were missing. 8:52 a.m. A panicked email from a certain writer about some guy from Asheville, North Carolina, who can't find the 5th book in a certain series that isn't on the racks at his local Walmart. 8:54 a.m. I advise that the book was published 4 years ago, and there are about 6 left in the warehouse, and the man is out of luck. 8:59 a.m. A retired brigadier general who writes military political thrillers is angrier than a wet hornet because his galley changes are not reflected in the advanced reading copies. 9 a.m. I advise him that this is SOP. A set of first pass galley pages is sent to the printer so we can meet our ARC date 6 months before the book goes on sale, so we have time to send it to reviewers at Publishers Weekly, Kirkus, etc. Which is why the ARC say advanced uncorrected proof. 9:07 a.m. Sales doesn't like the title Devil's Brigade. Walmart is threatening to cancel orders unless the title is changed to something that doesn't reflect satanic elements. 9:13 a.m. One of the romance editors has decided that she wants to do Westerns, and can I recommend any authors? I throw a bottle of raspberry seltzer at her. 9:20 a.m. Publishers Weekly lands in my inbox. There's a review of a mystery novel coming out in July. They crucified it. 9:25 a.m. An author who's working on a mafia book calls me. Some scary men showed up on his doorstep and threatened him with his family if the book isn't published. I tell him, send the wife and kids to the country for the next 6 months. He sort of likes that idea. The editor's fairly sexist, by the way. 9:27 a.m. Agent calls. Did I read the manuscript she submitted yet? I say, you only sent it yesterday. 9:30 a.m. Another agent calls. Where's the delivery and acceptance money for the manuscript? I say, he hasn't delivered it yet. 9:35 a.m. Email from an author. The IRS is about to put a lien on his house for unpaid taxes, and can we loan him $65,000 against future royalties? I say, your last book sold 854 copies. You better find an apartment. Multiply this by 1 hour, by 8 or 9, and you get a typical day in the life of an editor. He's being slightly funny. Yeah, he's a pretty funny guy. Except when you try to deal with him as a writer. He's being a little facetious, but not entirely. I mean, you think editors sit around in their office all day long and they're reading manuscripts. It's not what's really happening today. Editors don't have time to do a lot of their reading in the major houses at office during their regular hours. They're meeting with art designers for the covers. They're in meetings with sales. They're in meetings. They're meeting with agents. They're meeting with other writers. They're meeting with just meeting after meeting after meeting. Most of the editing has to be done on the subway home or on weekends when they're off and stuff like that. So that's when most of the reading does, and that's when most of the first reads, which hasn't changed, aren't going directly to the editor. They're going to, if it's an unsolicited manuscript, and most New York houses still don't really like to take unsolicited manuscripts, but they will, or unagented manuscripts, but they will occasionally. But these go through a slush pile. The slush pile is going through some very young novice clerk type that's going to be reading a lot of the books and stuff like that, and they're going to say, usually, no. Because it's a lot easier for an editor, and this hasn't changed in all the years of publishing, it's a lot easier for an editor to say no than it is to say yes. What editors are trying to do is look for a reason to say no. This is why we can't publish your book. It's a business. It can be a fairly cutthroat business. Years ago, let's say years and years and years ago, ancient history, here's the way it works in a publishing office. There's a meeting between the salespeople and the publishers and the editors and stuff like that, and they're just having their coffee. Well, this far back, they're probably having their bourbon or bathtub gin. And an editor says, hey, you know what? I've got this book here. It's by this guy named Faulkner or something, and it's kind of weird. It's kind of multiple first person. And he writes these really, really longs, and he uses a lot of semicolons. I've never seen so many semicolons or paragraphs this long. But you know, there's something really about him that really is just kind of captivating me. He's got kind of a cool story. He's done a lot of funny, weird things. He drinks like a sieve. But you know, I think maybe we ought to take a chance on this guy named Faulkner. And they say, okay. Now here's how it works today. Hey, I got this weird kind of manuscript today, and it's by this guy named Faulkner, and you know, it's kind of weird. I don't know how you classify the story. It's kind of fiction, maybe regional fiction, maybe kind of Mississippi fiction, and you know, it's kind of hard to read. You when we try to sell the audio book rights, it's going to be really difficult for an actor to really get through all this stuff. But I think it's a pretty good book, and yeah, I think we can sell it. But then sales is going to chime in. You're talking about a book set in Mississippi? You're talking about a book that we're going to have a hard time getting even audio to buy it? And you're saying, this is some new guy that nobody's ever heard of? And we can't really market this as one particular genre? Pass. And sales wins. Marketing and sales is who you're pitching to, not the editors. Today, when you're coming up to pitch a story, an idea for a novel, at a workshop or a writer's conference or something like that, one of the questions you might be asked is, what's your platform for fiction? Platform? By the way, my backup band is a little late. They got stuck in traffic. Probably with all that flooding going on. What the heck is a platform? What is a platform? I don't know. I mean, I'm writing fiction. I mean, in my case, I'm writing westerns. It's kind of a historical western. I got this idea for a baseball western. What? It's kind of crazy. What's your platform? Who's going to read it? What's your platform? What is your mission? What is your statement? Stuff like that. It's a crazy business. It has always been a crazy business. That's one thing that has never changed. And writers are crazy. Here's another thing about publishing. I had a breakfast meeting in Santa Fe a few months ago. There had been a publishers meeting, a publishers kind of convention in Santa Fe. And this is not one of my publishers. I just kind of know him by chance. And he said, let's have breakfast. And since he's buying, and since I'm a full-time writer, so when someone offers me free food, I say, okay. And it was at a nice restaurant in Santa Fe. There are a lot of nice restaurants in Santa Fe. So yeah, I drive in and I meet him. And he says, we've been to, being politely, I said, how's the convention going? He goes, yeah, it's been pretty good. We've got a lot of good programs, a lot of good panels. Kind of like a writer's convention, except the panels are a little different. And panels where I've been to writers' conferences and organizational meetings, the panels are usually aimed at getting your success. I mean, how's it marketing? How do you market your own books? How do you do research for a certain subject? How do you is it worth having an agent? Stuff like that. Those aren't the kind of panels they were doing at this convention, according to most of the people I talked to, which was just that one guy. He says, yeah, we had a good panel. The panel was how to screw your writer. Because that really wasn't the name of the panel, but that was the general theme, is how to screw over your writer. How do we get our best deal and leave the writer out of money and whatever and stuff like that? And that's the publisher's job too, is how to make it best for the publisher and least favorable for the writers in terms of advances, in terms of royalties, in terms of first rights and everything else. How do we get the best deal that we can? It's a business. It's always been a business. It's always been a business. The other panel they had was how to train your writer. And he says that was the title. So you're kind of seeing the chain of, we are the grunts. But what do they have to do if we weren't giving them product? Things like that. So it's just kind of a crazy business. And things are changing in publishing all the time. What you're finding is that they are being consolidated. And when the consolidation process comes, people get let go. Or it was, my background was newspapers. I worked in sports at the Dallas Times-Herald.
Rest in peace.
Please. And the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. And this was at the kind of the tail end of the glory days of being a newspaper journalist. It was exciting. It was fun. You had huge editorial offices. I think there probably were 300 people in editorial at the Star-Telegram when I left. there were probably, well, there were 1,100 employees at the Dallas Times-Herald. That includes truck drivers, that includes printers, that includes everything from journalists on down, clerks and everything. 1,100 people, which is why I got 3 months of unemployment because of the plant closing law. If you had more than 1,000 employees, you had to provide 3 months of severance, which came in handy since the Fort Worth Star-Telegram really dragged its feet about hiring a writer, an editor who had just bought a house, who had just moved into that brand new house on the day I got the phone call telling me that our paper was closing. But in that time, in my business, in my 15 years of the business, I had seen the number of hirings go down and down and down as circulations went down and down and down, and primarily as advertising revenues went down and down and down. So that when we once had a staff of maybe 10 or 12 at night trying to put out a sports section that was fairly substantial in size, by the time I was leaving this Fort Worth Star-Telegram, that was probably down to like 6. You're doing the same amount of work with less people. It is same and true in New York and all publishing now. They're doing it with less and less people because sales keep going down, turnover is always rampant, and when you're dealing with a lot of people that they're hiring young, inexperienced editors a lot of the time who can't quite grasp a lot of things. I notice this in newspapers today, you know. I mean, I read through a newspaper and say, ooh, how do you make that mistake? What was the copy editor thinking? And then you realize, oh, wait a minute, they probably had one copy editor handling every story, not just in sports, but they had one copy editor doing sports, news, business, features. It is hard work being a copy editor. So the thing that writers have to do, and this has always been true, you try to do the best you can, but as a newspaper journalist, I mean, you're writing pretty fast, and I still have that habit of writing too fast. So I make a lot of mistakes, and then I go back and I try to correct those mistakes, and then I go back and try to correct more mistakes, and then I correct more mistakes and more mistakes, and then I send it in, and then I get the galleys back and I find more mistakes, and I see a lot of places where they have saved my butt. They have saved my hide. They have saved me from major embarrassment. And then the book comes out after going through all these editing processes and everything's cool, and I even get the audio book. I never read my own books after they're published, but I will listen to them because as an actor, it's kind of fun to say, hey, that's not exactly how I envisioned that being good. Say it, but that's pretty good. I like that. I mean, as an actor interpretation, that's all it's all about. How do you do that? Well, that's pretty cool. And then I'm driving around, you know, dodging these pterodactyls that are trying to damage my car. And I'm listening and saying, wow, I actually wrote that. And then I'm driving around on the lookout for those mutant pterodactyls. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I actually wrote that. Ooh, that's really bad. I mean, what do you mean? I wish somebody had called that. But it's publishing. I mean, you write 60,000 words. You're writing 60,000 words for a novel, 90,000 words for a novel, 120,000 words for a nonfiction book. Chances are 1, 2, 3, 4, 20 of those are going to be wrong. You know, I tell my son, you know, when we used to coach him in baseball, you know, you go 3 for 10, 3 for 10, 3 for 10. You're in the Hall of Fame. You get 3 out of 10 questions right on your final, you fail. So if I get a few words wrong in a book, I'm okay with that. I've started doing a lot more nonfiction than I do fiction these days. In fact, I just finished one book, which was kind of a cold call. It's a book on the American West on film. It's coming out by an academic publisher out of California, and they called me up and they said, hey, you were recommended to us by an author. And I knew the author, and he had done a number of film histories and stuff like that. And I said, well, that's pretty cool. So we asked him first. He couldn't do it. He didn't have the time, but he recommended you. What do you think? And I said, well, what's the book about? He goes, well, we're going to take like 10 to 12 movies, Western movies in this case, and we're going to compare it to history. So the movie version of history as compared to the actual history, but we also want to see how the movies reflect the time in which they were made. So for High Noon, you've got towns and lawmen for the historical part, and you've got the blacklist for the contemporary part. I said, well, this is a very fascinating idea, and the first question I asked was, how are you handling photographs? And he said, we have our own in-house department that will handle photographs. And I said, let's talk some more, because you're speaking the language of my tribe. Because photographs in nonfiction have become incredibly dicey, controversial material, and especially in Hollywood, because of rights. Photographers, there's a lot of people, especially writers, don't seem to realize is that photographers have a thing called copyright too, as long as it was produced after 1929, 1923, somewhere around there. And a lot of publishers are kind of sticklers for having the rights on that. They're not only, and rightfully so, I mean, that's just someone else owns that photo. I get, I'm editing Roundup magazine, I get people who say, you can pull this photo off the internet. No, I can't. Because I'm not sure if when that photo was taken, what the rights are to that photograph. If I can't find the rights to that photograph, I can't use that photograph. If I can't acquire the rights to that photograph, I'm not using that photograph. If you're not giving me the rights to use this for one issue of Roundup magazine, then I'm not using it. You understand? It's photographer rights. And Hollywood likes to charge a lot of money. Years ago, True West magazine had asked me to do a interview on West Studio, and they said, can you get some art? I said, oh, okay, I'll try. So I contacted TIG Productions, which did Dances with Wolves, and they were willing to give me a photograph for $300 and something bucks. I said, well, you know what? I don't believe True West is really going to be doing that. Now, you can get away a little bit on magazines, because a lot of times magazines will be sent press packages for films and stuff like that, and it's stated out this is for use for publication in a newspaper or magazine. It never actually said books, but it's okay for publication. So you can try to do that, and you can use that one time in your magazine as long as it's dealing with this particular movie. Books, it gets a little more complicated, and publishers, a lot of publishers are a little more strict on what they want. Now, some publishers are okay if you're using maybe a couple of stills, because there still is this fair use. But fair use is kind of a tricky definition. I mean, what is fair use? How many stills am I allowed to use for one movie in one book? So when they said, yeah, we handle all the rights and we handle all the acquisitions of photographs, I said, we can talk some more. This is okay with me, because it's a whole lot less headaches for me. So when I'm doing something like that, when I'm doing a magazine article, I'm always looking for the rights and stuff like that. What are the rights? What are the rights? Who owns this photograph? Is it okay for me to use? What is my responsibility? So, and as a writer, when you're doing some books, sometimes they're going to ask you to acquire the photographs. But then there are also they might be strict enough to say, if you say it's okay, if you send it in to us, it's okay, we'll print it, but if you get sued, we're signaling them on you, because it's your responsibility, as spelled out in your contract. And it's getting to be also that publishers want to know, how are you doing this interview? Here's what they want from one publisher I have, and they say, it's fairly loose in what we require from you, but you need to send us, it can just be an email, it can be a letter or something like that, but anybody that you interview and that you quote, we need a release from that person that says, in effect, I grant Johnny D. Boggs permission to use my quotes about the making of the movie Little Big Man in the book The American West on Film, and I understand that there will be no remuneration involved. That's all, usually. But you probably better want to keep your notes handy just in case someone says, I didn't say that. I only got accused once of misquoting somebody. And that was when I was in college, and a baseball player, whose name will go unmentioned because nobody's ever heard of him, said that I misquoted him because he had said something that, the practice was kind of loose, the coach was kind of fun, it wasn't like they were running a boot camp or something like that, which I didn't find very offensive or anything like that, but the coach didn't really appreciate it, and then he said, well, I was misquoted. But the 3 other players that I quoted, one of them, 2 of them actually stood up and said, you're a liar. You said that. I mean, he didn't misquote us. Why would he misquote you? Now, come on, get off of it. So that was kind of cool. But yeah, they want to make sure the quotes are right because if you're writing nonfiction, they want everything accurate. And apparently one of the publishers, not the one that I did the American West on film for, but one of the publishers once said that we had a little bit of a problem, that we published this book with a lot of quotes that the guy kind of made up. That and a lot of his facts didn't kind of turn out right. There was a book I read, back to the editing part, there was a book I read, published by the University of Nebraska Press, on Larry Doby. Larry Doby, everybody knows Jackie Robinson. Larry Doby was the first African-American professional baseball player in the major leagues, in the American League, signed with the Cleveland Indians. Not as well known as Jackie Robinson. And the University of Nebraska Press, okay, first of all, you're thinking the University of Nebraska, what are they doing publishing books about baseball? That's a football state. And the University of Nebraska is a solid football program. You never really read a whole lot about their baseball programs, but they do a substantial number of books about baseball. They help with the Society of American Baseball Research. They do a number of baseball books. So they are a legitimate publisher of baseball nonfiction. So I'm reading this book on Larry Doby, and it's kind of interesting because I've never read a biography of Larry Doby, and I'm saying, this is kind of cool, this is kind of cool, and this is kind of cool. And it's talking about the early years of baseball with black players allowed and then getting kind of kicked out. And they bring up the fact that, to say that Cap Anson from Chicago was a black player who was very influential in baseball in the late 1800s. And I closed the book and I said, my God, Cap Anson wasn't black. Not only wasn't he black, he was a vehement racist who probably helped close the doors for African-American baseball players in the 1800s that held sway until Larry Doby and Jackie Robinson broke down that barrier line. How can an academic press that publishes a substantial number of baseball books get this fact wrong? Where were your copy editors? Where were your fact checkers? And then I realized, oh yeah, this is the 21st century. Fact checkers and copy editors are kind of going by the wayside. So if you're writing nonfiction, if you're writing fiction, the idea that you really need to do is make sure you get everything right. Everything right. I'm always scared to death when I write a nonfiction book. One thing, because it slows me down. Because I can't get in the flow of writing. I have to stop. Because I have to source something. And then I have to make sure I got the source right. And then pray I got it right before I send it off to the editor, and we'll see. But I'm always nervous about that kind of stuff. It's kind of a crazy, crazy, crazy world. It's always been a crazy, crazy business. It's always been a very frustrating business. It is a business that is not meant for everyone. So to see this kind of crowd of people and no one's really throwing up or seeing the faces kind of turn white and pale, that's kind of neat. That's really, really cool. That's really, really cool. So if I have any other thoughts of wisdom, I will bring it. I will shoot them out. But if there are any questions, I will be glad to answer anything I can. Which isn't much because I'm a lowly writer and not an editor. One last thought here, because I am an editor, and I was an editor, and I am a writer. As a writer, I have never won an argument with an editor. As an editor, I have never lost an argument with a writer. Yes, question?
Thank you so much. This was just great. My question is, almost everything you said would suggest that people should look into self-publishing instead of putting themselves through the aggravation of a publisher. And so I just wanted you to sort of clarify that. In your opinion, if you, as a writer, forget about the editor and publisher part, as a writer, what would you recommend to someone who is looking to get their book published? Because I've heard so many stories, pros and cons, either way.
Well, it's your comfort zone. When people ask, would you ever consider self-publishing? I said, I've got all the respect in the world for someone that's got enough confidence in his or her work to actually publish it themselves. And it used to be a very bad stigma. It's kind of funny to me, always struck. Western Writers of America, when we decided, this is years ago, this is many years ago, when the organization decided to allow self-published material as qualifications for membership and allow self-published material to be entered in our Spur Award competition, it was a huge backlash. Members quit over this. A lot of those members are now self-publishing their works. That's true. Because they couldn't quite see the future of this. So there was always this kind of, you're self-published, it's all vanity, which maybe a lot of it is, but it's also vanity for me to send my book out to a publisher wherever they're based and say, hey, I think this is okay, what do you think? But it was always this really bad idea to self-publish a book. But if you look at the music industry, when Willie Nelson started doing his own music, when a lot of people started following it up and doing their own independent labels, it was never looked as a bad thing. It was a look at, hey, it's about time, because musicians, man, I read biographies on musicians, Otis Redding and people like that. Man, the publishing world there, they really, yeah, man, I'm glad I'm not a songwriter or a singer, because my backup band never shows up. You're lucky for that. But if you're going to do all right, here's why. Here's my thought on that. Why I never self-published. I know I come across as this really confident guy with a lot of success, but I'm really insecure. Especially when I'm in a rental car. And I got to deal with hurts. I don't have that confidence in being a marketer. I don't have that confidence in being a publisher. I don't want to be a book distributor. I don't want to be a publisher. I don't want to be a literary agent. I don't want to be a salesperson. All I want to do is sit in my little room, my messy, trashed up room, and sit at my computer all alone with nobody to get me. And I don't have to answer the phone. I can just sit around and write and write and write. And that's all I want to do. People ask me, why do you have an agent? And I say, I don't want to deal with all that other stuff. I'm not that good of a businessman. If you see my tax filing system, you'll understand why. My receipts and all that. I am not a good businessman. I am not a good marketer. I think sometimes I am a halfway decent writer. And I think sometimes I'm a good writer, and there are days when I can't string two sentences together. But I don't want to do that. So it's your choice, really. It comes down to what you want to do. Self-publishing is great. If you can do that, if you can have your own business plan and figure out how you're going to actually make money, but then you're going to have to do all the stuff. Paying the 15% for my agent to handle all the business actually gets me out of trouble, because people say, we'd like to maybe adapt your book into a play or a novel. So you got to go through my agent. And that's because I don't want to be the bad guy. I want my agent to be the bad guy, bad girl. So, but yeah, it's your choice. More? Yes?
I have a friend who's a librarian, and she said there's one real difficulty with self-publishing. You get somebody who walks into a public library, and and those books don't end up on the shelves, and they don't end up in interlibrary loans. So
Right.
she has people come in and said, I'd like to copy this book, and you get it to interlibrary loan. She says, you got to go through Amazon or whomever has it on electronic sales because we can't get it. So it's so hard for self-publishing to
Right.
end up in public libraries,
Right.
and we've been that way.
And here's the catch. The catch, good point, yeah. Libraries and dealing with that, and our bookstores and dealing with that and stuff like that. I mean, it's harder. I used to do as many book signings as I can, and now I just say, is it really that? I mean, years ago there was a study. The average number of books sold during a 2-hour sale at a bookstore was 2. Now it's better than none. I've sold 2. I've sold none. I've sold more than 2. But it's kind of tough. So I don't do as many book signings as I'm sure the publishers and those want me to. But on the other hand, the publishers you got to have a Facebook presence. It's better if you even tweet. Because a lot of the marketing has been brought up is really on you. They used to be, if they're paying an author a significant advance, they'll do a little bit of promotion. But they also expect that author to do a little bit of promotion. And if you're a mid-list writer, they expect you to do practically all the promotion. In exchange, they're getting your books out to the bookstores and libraries and things like that. If not, if you're self-publishing, it's your responsibility. So, it's your call. There's nothing there. I don't have anything. I have all the respect for someone with enough confidence to self-publish. Yes.
If you self-publish with someone who gives you an ISBN, doesn't that enable you to be in the library and the stores?
An ISBN is going to be definitely something that all bookstores not all bookstores, but the majority of bookstores are going to want. And it's also going to be something that the libraries can use too. So you do need an ISBN, and you can buy bins of ISBN and stuff like that. Again, this is the business side that I have no idea about. But yes, an ISBN is something very helpful. Yes.
So I must be really stupid, but I'm an indie author and I get my own ISBN.
Yeah.
I've never heard of an indie author not have an ISBN.
That won't necessarily bring attention to the
I
collection.
know, and that's 2 different subjects. Attention but the ISBN is a no-brainer. Your
Right.
book's not a book unless has an
Right,
ISBN.
that's what I found as well.
Yeah, ISBNs. You
just
don't
wanted
need
to
them
make
if you're going to
sure
sell. I got a friend of mine who's now deceased, but he used to show up and go to bars and said, I did most of my sales at the bars. Okay, now here's the other thing. In my contracts, and most of my contracts, I am not allowed contractually to buy a book at the reduced author's rate, 50%, 40%, whatever that, and then sell those books. That's against my contract. I've been in breach of contract if I do that. Because the publisher wants the bookstore to buy the book. And then you get the royalty on what they sell, less what they might return. And then when they return a bunch of your books, well, then your royalty checks might not be coming and things like that. And then again, eventually they're going to remainder your books. And then when they remainder your books, you can buy them for $5 a copy, whatever, $2 a copy, whatever. And then you're free to sell those books. So, but yes, the crazy things about the publishing world. They want to screw you over as much as they can. Which is business. Politics, everything. It's today. Baseball, football, everything. That's the business. That's what this country seems to be leading towards. Any other questions? Yes?
Johnny, I talk to professional writers, and they often say you've got to treat them like a job. You understand and so forth. And I worry about that a little bit. Any particular character settings that you write about is just plain fun to write?
I love to have written. I hate to write. First novel I finished, it took me 3.5 years to write because, I got a job, a fairly stressful job. I'm not a cop or anything, but I got people threatening to kill me because the Cowboys lost, and I had nothing to do with that, So, it was a high stress job. But at the same time, it was a job, but I had these distractions. You know, hey, the Royals are in town. Let's go see them play. Hey, you know, enchiladas for lunch sounds pretty good. No, I mean, I have a job. I say my commute just is not as far as a lot of people. So what I do is I get up in the morning and I shower. I know that the cliche is the writer's in his bathrobe or you know, he's sitting in this bathtub with a typewriter or stuff like that. No, I shower and I'm dressed and I've got my coffee. I send my son off to school or whatever. And then I'm in the office and I'm working straight through, you know, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 hours a day. It really depends on the deadlines, but I'm working and how much work I know I need to get done. So it is a job, and you've got to approach it like a job. Publishers, one thing publishers want, they don't want a one-book wonder. They don't want, I used to be able to say this about Harper Lee, and now I can't even say it about Harper Lee, even though I think she only wrote one book. But they don't want a one-book wonder. And when I realized after I spent 3.5 years writing that book, it took me 3 years to sell, that I didn't really sell until I got an agent. But I realized that's not what a publisher wants, especially for fiction. A publisher wants someone that can deliver a book every year, every 2 years, whatever it takes, because my advances aren't up there with that rolling girl from England or something like that. I write a lot, because one thing, I'm not sure how long these publishers are going to want me. And that's the other thing about that. It's like an actor. You're only as good as your last movie. Well, you're only as good as your last book. Let's look at the figures on this. It took me a long time to go. I had a 3-book deal early with a New York publisher, and those books tanked. It took quite a few years before, after that unsuccessful publishing experience, that another New York house would actually look at me. Sales, I mean, you know, yeah, I've got a lot of awards, that's cool. Bottom line is sales. The bottom line is sales, it's a business. You can't make money, and the publisher can't make money on your book. And this is all figured out when they're meeting. They're saying, okay, this book, let's see, it's set here, that's going to get us this people's probably going to buy this book. I think we'll be able to sell this many copies, priced at this much. If we sell this much and print this much, we can pay them this much of an advance. And maybe if all the cosmos is lined right, he'll be happy and they'll be happy and everything will be cool. And if it sells more than that, great. If for some reason we take a bath on this book, you're toast. Business, yes.
What about the international market? Because this is what I think is going to happen. Because of technology and the way that people communicate now, the world is going to get, smaller, and you're going to have customers in China and Japan and in Russia. And so I see an international market, probably language translators that will probably be computerized. And so there's opportunities there in a world market. Do you have any?
I've just had a short story translated into German. I don't think I get any money on that. I did get money on, I had a novel translated into Italian. And I said, well, it's pretty good. It was pretty much a spaghetti western to begin with. But these are all negotiated. You've got your international sub-rights and all that, if you're talking with a major house and stuff like that. But yeah, it is getting more, we're getting smaller and smaller as a world. And it's a lot. Someone just said that they had a book published somewhere, and I don't think they were even translated. So, English is more of a universal language and things like that. My late father-in-law, who was insane, he used to always tell me, you need to write a novel called The China Pony. Because do you know how many people live in China? And they're all going to read a novel about the China Pony. I never wrote that novel, and I never intend to write that novel. And people think, hey, you know, if I get a book, all these libraries are going to be able to buy my book, especially if it's hardcover, because it's going to last a long time. The libraries just want their books, and library readers, they love Westerns and stuff like that, so let's just hit that library market. You're failing to understand the little point that libraries don't make a whole lot of money. And we're talking about European rights. Now, here's the great thing about Europe. You check out a book in Europe and in some of the European countries, you get a little dinero for that as a writer if you're in Europe and some of the countries there. It's not a whole lot of money, and there is a cap. So if everybody's checking out one particular author's books, that author isn't going to make a significant amount of money, but it's enough money to keep an author and stuff like that. If they photocopy a book, and this probably applies to nonfiction more, the author's going to get a little payment for that. Not a whole lot of money. They've tried and tried and tried and tried and tried to get that started in the United States. It has not gained any traction at all. In the same way with Google, you know, Google Books, things like that. They're publishing your books a lot of times, sometimes in its entirety. In fact, the guy who published the short story said, I found it on Google. I said, you found the whole thing on Google? Yeah. I said, a lot of other things that I won't repeat here, but I said, you know. And they've tried Authors Guild. If you're a professional writer, you need to belong to the Authors Guild. If you're a writer who's been published, you probably need to be belonging to a group of like-minded authors. Western Writers of America, International Thriller Writers, Mystery Writers of America, Horror Writers, things like that. If you're doing some genre, that's a good group to pick because you're with like-minded people and you're getting the chance to be with editors and stuff like that. So doing all that. Yes?
Have you run into the phenomenon where you Google your book and the first hit that comes up is by an independent bookseller offering it for $150? And how do you not scare away your fan base by having that be the first one that pops up?
A similar thing in that with Authors Guild has been trying to get Amazon, the evil Amazon, that we kind of hate, but we kind of love to hate. Because they do sell a lot of our books, but you know, they're kind of bad. What the Authors Guild is trying to do, and this has also been unsuccessful, the problem with Amazon is when you go to, and like I click on my book, there's my book, I can buy it at full price with the Amazon discount sometimes, but then these are all these used books on the same page. And you know, I admit it, if I don't really particularly care for the author, I'm going to get that used book. So just to deny him of the royalty. They have tried to get that separated, that you've got your book right here and you don't see the used book that you can get for a discount and not get a royalty on. And Amazon says, no. We keep trying to protest that. We keep trying to get something like that. And for us at Google, the same thing. I mean, yeah, you see that and it's you're a writer. Everybody wants to just screw you over, okay? And you got to get used to that. They filed a lawsuit against Google for doing those things, and the stupid courts have sided with Google. It's a tough business. And it's a tough role to be a writer. So you gotta have a thick skin. And you gotta realize that they're all out to get you. I'm not paranoid, but they're all out to get you. They're all out to get you, and it's your job, if you can tough it out, to let them get you less than they'd like to get you. Brilliant.
That's the next book. So, Johnny, we're not trying to get you. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, you guys who are going to be here for the workshop, stick around. We're going to take a 25-minute break before the workshop. And please,